Welcome everyone. Today in this presentation, we will be walking you through some very important information about the King County Housing Authority, the Housing Choice Voucher Program, and in particular, the Emergency Housing Voucher Program and how your clients can use their vouchers. The King County Housing Authority is an independent municipal corporation separate from the King County government. King County Housing Authority's jurisdiction is King County outside of the cities of Seattle and Renton, which both of them have their own housing authorities who also are administering the EHVs. The Housing Authority was created by the state of Washington in 1939 to provide affordable housing for its community. Nearly half of KCHA's families are housed on the private market through a Housing Choice Voucher or the Section 8 program. Annually, we house more than 19,000 households, which equates to about 50,000 individuals. We receive the majority of our funding through the federal government, also known as HUD. In the next few slides, we will provide an overview of the steps in the emergency housing voucher process. Step 1, the referrals. The King County Housing Authority only accepts referrals for the emergency housing vouchers directly from the Continuum of Care's Coordinated Entry for All system or other partner referral agencies working under an agreement with the King County Regional Homeless Authority to make referrals to the Coordinated Entry for the EHV program. Since the Housing Authority is not taking direct referrals from applicants, the King County Housing Authority has informed current waitlist families of the EHV availability and the direct referral process through the COC. In order to be eligible and referred for an emergency housing voucher, to qualify, the household must meet one of the following criteria: be experiencing homelessness, fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking, or recently homeless with a high risk of housing instability without ongoing rental assistance. That includes participants that are in rapid rehousing and moving on from permanent supportive housing. The emergency housing voucher requirements for citizenship are the same as the Housing Choice Voucher program, which requires at least one member of the household to be a U.S. citizen or a non-U.S. citizen with eligible immigration status to receive assistance. In addition, to qualify, the total gross household's income must not exceed 30% of AMI. However, the King County Regional Homeless Authority will consider people up to 50% AMI on a case-by-case. Please refer to the link for the income limit chart. There are 3 non-qualifiers to the program. If the head of household or a household member is registered as a lifetime registered sex offender under a state registry program, has been convicted for the manufacture or production of methamphetamines on the premises of a federally assisted housing, or has a history of threatening, abusive, or violent behavior towards a King County Housing Authority staff within the last 12 months. If a client is denied based on one of these 3 non-qualifiers, the client will have an opportunity to request an informal appeal process if they are not in agreement with the denial. The EHV intake application includes forms to be completed by the service provider or referring agency, the applicant or head of household, and the COC. The packet is clearly labeled to identify which parts are to be completed by which entity. Please note that the application packet must be completed in its entirety to avoid any delays in processing time. We will also review the application packet in depth in another training video. In addition to completing the intake packet in its entirety, the following items are also needed to complete the application. Please make sure to include the following items with the packet: a photo ID for all household members that are 18 and older. Examples include a state-issued ID or driver's license, a passport, or any government-issued ID, Social Security cards for all household members, adults and minors, proof of citizenship or a permanent residence. Examples include a permanent resident card, employment authorization card. Income verifications such as 3 months of current pay stubs, or the Social Security Benefits Award Letter or Pension Letter. Waivers will be made available for those applicants that do not have a copy of their ID, Social Security card, or proof of citizenship. However, the Housing Authority will require applicants to obtain and submit those documents no later than 90 days after lease-up for proof of citizenship and 120 days after lease-up for IDs and Social Security cards. Step 2, the application intake process. Each application will be assigned a KCHA intake housing specialist. Once the application packet has been received, the intake specialist will notify the client and the service provider of its receipt. Please feel free to contact your intake specialist for any questions or concerns related to the application. Please allow up to 2 weeks for KCHA to process the application. If for any reason there are items that are missing or additional verifications are needed, the assigned intake specialist will contact the service provider caseworker or the client. Step 3, voucher issuance briefing. Once a family qualifies and is deemed eligible for the emergency housing voucher, an intake briefing is scheduled via phone or Zoom. The briefing orientation is mandatory per HUD regulations in order for an applicant to receive a voucher, and it runs about an hour to 2 hours in length. Briefing attendance is very important. Not only do clients receive their vouchers, but we go over a wealth of information. We introduce clients to the voucher program rules, explain how rent and their subsidy is calculated. We review payment standards, portability, and how to utilize their voucher outside of the King County Housing Authority jurisdiction. Inform families of their rights and their responsibilities. Again, a lot of important information is given out at this session. Please note that the King County Housing Authority is currently designing a virtual briefing to allow families the option of watching a video briefing and electronic certifications. We will be partnering with community agencies to help implement this process mid-September. Next, we'll cover information that is shared during the briefing that would be important for providers to know as well. We will start with, what is a voucher? The voucher is a subsidy that allows low-income tenants to rent a unit on the private market. The voucher is an official document and also states the rules of the HCV program. An important question we get is, how much is my voucher worth? When calculating the portion of the rent, the client's household income is considered. With that said, every voucher rental estimate will vary based on income and rental price. Depending on the cost of rent for the unit they find, the client will pay between 28% and 40% of their income towards rent. KCHA will pay the remaining portion directly to the landlord. Here is an example of what a housing choice voucher looks like. On the voucher, you will find unit size, which indicates the number of bedrooms a family qualifies for, the issue date, which will be the same date as the briefing your client attended, an expiration date, the name of the family representative, and the issuing housing authority's name. King County Housing Authority Occupancy Standards. In determining the proper bedroom size for each family, the following principles apply. The subsidy standards must provide for the smallest number of bedrooms needed to house the family without overcrowding. The head of household and spouse, or significant other, will be allotted one bedroom. Children will be allotted one bedroom for every 2 children living in the household, regardless of age or sex. Persons of a different generation shall not be required to share a bedroom. For an example, a grandmother shall not be required to share a bedroom with her children or her grandchildren. EHV families may choose to live within our jurisdiction or anywhere within the United States. Moving outside of our jurisdiction is called portability, or porting one's voucher out to another housing authority. What is portability? Portability refers to the process through which the family can transfer or port their rental subsidy when they move to a location outside of the King County Housing Authority's jurisdiction, which is King County outside of the cities of Seattle and Renton, who have their own housing authorities. If a client has found a unit in another jurisdiction, we will need the following. Notify us which housing authority they wish to port through. Complete our portability request form. Once we have sent the portability packet to the receiving housing authority, the client can then contact the receiving housing authority to schedule an appointment to receive their voucher for that jurisdiction. Please note, each housing authority will have their own rules and program policies. If the client decides to port their voucher outside of the King County Housing Authority's jurisdiction, the emergency housing voucher services provided through this program may be affected depending on the receiving housing authority's emergency housing voucher policy. Reasonable accommodations to program rules are available to those households that include a person with a disability. Reasonable accommodations requests may include voucher extensions, unit size standards, ability to rent from a relative, or the need for a live-in aid. For expedited processing, reasonable accommodation requests should be submitted in writing via the form provided through this link. But we can accept requests through phone, email, or in person. The payment standards is the maximum amount the King County Housing Authority can subsidize or pay in housing assistance payments, also known as HAP. KCHA has 6 payment standards. They are based on zip codes and are aligned with the costs of local rental markets, which vary greatly across the region. We have multiple payment standards to allow our clients to have the geographical choice in their housing search. Our current payment standards can be found on our website. Here is a map of how the payment standards are dispersed across the KCHA jurisdiction. Here's the payment standards by zip code. At the briefing orientation, clients are given their rental estimate sheet, which is one of the most important documents in their packet. This form allows them to see the rent amounts that they should target within their housing search. There's 3 important ways this form is organized. Whether the client is searching for an apartment or house, whether the landlord pays for utilities or does not, what tier the unit they are looking at in is. Remember, this is based on zip codes. Once you've figured out these 3 points, you can see what range you should target for your rental search. One number is the maximum amount. This is the amount that cannot be exceeded. Seeking a unit towards these upper limits will increase your portion of the rent. It will move you closer to 40% of your income. If you find a unit that is less, your contribution to the rent will be lower. At the top of the sheet, you can see the estimated range that you will be responsible to pay towards rent and utilities. As a reminder, each estimate sheet is based on an individual's current income and what rent amounts they qualify for. Step 4, the housing search. When a client receives their voucher, it is good for 120 days. We encourage our clients to be active in their housing search and motivated to find a unit within these first 4 months. However, if they are approaching 120 days and are unable to locate a unit, they can submit in writing a request for an extension. Clients can request an additional 2 extensions of 60 days, so a total of an extra 120 additional days. But this must be approved by a KCHA manager or director in writing. Ideally, clients are able to find a place within these first initial 120 days. Referring case managers at the community organization may also request for extensions on behalf of their clients. Forms can be found on our website and the link below. As a requirement for the Emergency Housing Voucher Program, all EHV holders are required to have access to housing navigation services. Housing navigation may be provided by your agency or by a King County Housing Authority contractor as needed. Here is a quick overview of the EHV navigation services process. We've mentioned before the referral, intake, and voucher issuance process. This diagram overlays navigation services with the standard voucher and leasing process. During the referral process, the referring agency will note on the application referral form whether the agency will provide navigation services to their client. After the intake process, KCHA will review the client file and make referrals to navigation service providers. If the referring agency provides navigation services, the client will continue to work with their case manager. If the referring agency does not provide navigation services, KCHA will refer them to a contract service provider. What does navigation services entail? This includes voucher application support. Agencies will provide individuals and families with responding to inquiries from KCHA, attending voucher briefings, and other meetings as needed. Rent-ready counseling. Provide the appropriate level of initial housing stabilization services, including but not limited to counseling on rental lease requirements, information about surrounding communities such as schools, groceries, public transportations, jobs, connections to other ongoing services such as health and social services, and ongoing services as necessary to ensure housing stability. Housing search. Locating rental units for lease. Introductions to landlords with units for lease. Landlord negotiations. Assisting with completing rental unit applications, and addressing rental barriers as feasible within the time frame established on the voucher. For example, existing landlord debt, or helping a client prepare a rental resume. Financial assistance. Provide financial resources as well as assistance and support on behalf of newly admitted EHV recipients to help overcome financial leasing barriers such as moving costs, utility arrears and hookup fees, renter's insurance when required, and new unit setup furnishings as needed. Step 5, the lease-up process. Once a client has located a unit, the first step of the process is completing the RFTA, the Request for Tenancy Approval. The next step is the inspection of the unit. The last step is signing the lease and the HAP contract, the final stage that solidifies the lease before move-in. The RFTA is a KCHA form that lets the housing authority know that our client has found a unit that they intend to rent. By submitting the RFTA to the KCHA office, it initiates the request for an inspection and allows the housing authority to determine if the rent of the unit fits within the parameters of the client's voucher and is reasonable for that area. Please note the RFTA is not a lease. It is simply the first step in the process of using one's voucher. No lease should be signed at this point. On the screen, there is a list of information that needs to be included when submitting the RFTA packet. This packet is to be signed and completed by the client and the landlord. It is important to note that the information in the packet is accurate and complete, so we are able to process it as quickly as possible with no delays. The King County Housing Authority has created a new online portal for RFTA submission, which is linked here. After submitting the RFTA and given that the unit fits within the rent amounts of the client's voucher, we will conduct an inspection. An inspector will reach out to the landlord to schedule a time to inspect the unit. Any questions regarding the inspection should be directed to the landlord. The inspection conducted looks at a number of safety factors. The list on the screen are inspection failed items that our inspection team frequently sees. Inspections look at a number of safety factors. One that I would like to call out is lead paint. If a client is looking to rent an older unit built prior to 1978 and have children under the age of 6 in their household, or if they are pregnant, the unit must be free of lead paint. If your client happens to be living in the unit currently and they intend to use their voucher for this unit, the voucher assistance will be effective the date the unit passes inspection. It is important to note that the client should not sign a lease prior to our inspection being completed. If the client does move in or sign a lease prior to the unit passing inspection, they will be responsible for the rent owed in full until the unit has passed inspection. Once the submitted RFTA is approved and the unit has passed inspection, the client and landlord can now enter in and sign the lease agreement. The lease agreement is between the tenant and the landlord. In addition to the lease, the housing authority and the landlord will also enter into an agreement. It is called the HAP Contract. This ensures that the monthly subsidy will be paid directly from KCHA to the landlord for the duration of the lease term. Step 6, ongoing support. After a family moves in, they will be assigned a post-move senior housing specialist. Families should contact their senior housing specialist if they have any issues or questions with their voucher. For example, any changes to their family composition, income, or have any issues they may have with their landlord. Community case managers will continue to support families with their housing stability and other resource needs. This concludes our presentation. Thank you.